You keep saying you're tired, but it's not the kind of tired that sleep can fix. It's not about needing more rest. It's about needing relief. There's a difference, because this kind of tired, it lives in your chest, in your jaw, in the constant tension in your stomach that you pretend not to notice. It's in the way you say, "I'm fine," a little too quickly. It's in the way you keep moving, even when every part of you is asking for a pause. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you're just carrying too much. You've been emotionally on for so long that you don't even realize it anymore. Always anticipating, always preparing, always thinking 2 steps ahead, just in case someone needs you, just in case something goes wrong, just in case the peace you've built starts to crack again. But here's the truth. You were never meant to hold this much. Not all at once. Not for this long. Not without space to process or release. And yet, you carry it anyway. You carry unspoken expectations. You carry the weight of other people's moods, reactions, silences. You carry guilt for needing time, for saying no, for not being everything to everyone all the time. It's no wonder you're exhausted. You've become the safe place for everyone else, and now there's nowhere for you to go. This video isn't here to give you another routine. It's not going to tell you to grind harder, hustle smarter, push through. It's here to remind you of something softer, that you don't need to earn your rest. You don't need to justify why you're tired. You don't need to explain why your energy's low or why you've pulled away. You're not tired because you've done too little. You're tired because you've been holding what was never yours to carry. And maybe today, you don't need to fix it. You don't need to figure it out. Maybe you just need to put it down, even for a moment, and feel what it's like to stand without the weight. That's where we begin. You've been carrying it for so long that the weight doesn't even feel heavy anymore. It just feels like you. You've adapted to it. You've shaped your entire nervous system around the stress, the hyper-awareness, the constant emotional responsibility. You've convinced yourself it's normal to be this tense all the time, to wake up already bracing for something, to fall asleep still mentally scanning everything that might be wrong, unresolved, or left unsaid. And that's the scariest part. Not just that you're carrying too much, but that it's become your baseline. You think you're tired because you didn't sleep well, but the truth is you never really let go, not even in rest. Your body might be still, but your mind is on overdrive. Your energy is still out there playing peacemaker, problem solver, caretaker, even when no one's asking. And maybe no one's ever told you this, but you're allowed to stop. You don't have to explain why you're tired. You don't need permission to feel overwhelmed. You don't need to wait until everything falls apart before you give yourself room to breathe. Because the problem isn't that you're weak. The problem is that you've been strong in all the ways that hurt. Strong in your silence, strong in your overfunctioning, strong in how much you tolerate before you ever ask for anything. But strength without boundaries? That's not noble. That's destructive. It disconnects you from your own needs. It convinces you that your value is tied to how much you can handle. It makes you feel guilty for simply taking care of yourself. And the longer you live that way, the more your body starts to speak the truth you've been ignoring. The tension in your shoulders? That's not just stress. That's emotional load. The pressure in your chest? That's everything you've been swallowing. The fog in your mind? That's what happens when you carry the weight of everything and try to stay clear at the same time. This kind of tiredness isn't solved by a nap. It's solved by release, by choosing, sometimes for the first time in your life, to say, this isn't mine to hold. And maybe it's not about walking away from your life. Maybe it's just about walking away from the version of you that thought being exhausted all the time was normal. Maybe it's about coming back to the parts of yourself you left behind while being everything for everyone else. Because that weight, it was never meant to be permanent. And just because you got used to carrying it, doesn't mean it belongs to you. You start forgetting who you were before the weight, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet erosion of self that happens when your life becomes all about managing what's heavy. You don't laugh the same way anymore. You don't sit still the same way anymore. You don't even breathe from your belly, because your body has learned to stay on edge, ready, alert. Your nervous system has turned you into a full-time crisis manager. Even when there's no crisis, you answer texts like it's an emergency. You say yes before you've even checked in with yourself. You agree to things while your stomach says no, because disappointing someone feels more dangerous than disappointing yourself. But here's the thing, when you carry too much for too long, you stop recognizing what's actually yours. What thoughts are yours? What opinions are yours? What desires are yours? You become a container for everything and everyone, and somehow you're the only one who never gets to take up space. That's what emotional overload does. It makes your life reactive. You're not living, you're responding. Responding to needs, to guilt, to fear, to pressure, to the idea that if you just keep going, eventually the peace will arrive. But peace doesn't show up at the end of burnout. It shows up in the moments you stop proving and start protecting. Protecting your time, your thoughts, your softness. Because there's a version of you underneath all that noise. A version who doesn't need to manage the energy in every room. A version who doesn't flinch when things go quiet. A version who trusts that not everything needs to be fixed, handled, or held by you. And the moment you stop clinging to the identity of the strong one, you start uncovering something more honest, the one who knows how to feel again. How to say, this is too much. How to say, I need time. How to say nothing at all. And let the silence take care of itself. Because what if the strength you've been chasing was never about how much you can hold, but about how much you're willing to let go? What if your peace doesn't live at the top of the mountain, but at the bottom of everything you've been avoiding feeling? What if the next version of you isn't stronger, smarter, faster, but lighter? Letting go isn't always a dramatic moment. Most of the time, it's subtle, quiet, almost invisible to anyone else. It looks like saying no without apologizing for it. It looks like not rushing to fill the silence after you say how you really feel. It looks like sitting in your car for 5 extra minutes because you finally gave yourself space to pause, not perform. It's when you stop spiraling every time someone pulls away. When you stop trying to explain yourself to people who've already decided not to understand. When you don't follow up, chase, or fix. Because deep down, you know that their comfort is not your responsibility. That's what putting the weight down feels like. Not louder, quieter. Not stronger, softer. Not faster, wiser. And the surprising part is, when you stop carrying everything, life doesn't fall apart. It actually starts to organize itself. You begin to see who was there because of your effort and who stays because of your presence. You see which conversations drain you and which ones make you feel like you can finally breathe. You realize how many things you were doing out of fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being replaced, fear of being seen as selfish. But the truth is, protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's spiritual hygiene. And no one claps when you start doing it. No one celebrates your boundary. No one throws a parade when you say, I'm not available for this anymore. But your body does. Your nervous system does. Your inner self, the one that's been whispering, please just slow down, finally exhales. You start waking up without dread. You stop overthinking your value every time you set a boundary. You learn how to rest without guilt. You learn how to exist without constantly monitoring the emotional temperature of every room. Because the truth is, you never needed to fix everything. You just needed to feel safe enough to stop. To stop gripping. To stop proving. To stop explaining yourself out of the habit of being misunderstood. And when that safety returns, not from others, but from within, you'll notice something even deeper. You're not tired anymore. You're just here, present, clear, still carrying things, but only the ones that are actually yours. The most unexpected part of putting the weight down is what it does to your mind. You've spent so long thinking in survival patterns that it feels normal. Scanning for what's next, overanalyzing what just happened, predicting what could go wrong. Always thinking 10 steps ahead, but never feeling fully where you are. You're not thinking clearly, you're calculating safety. Will they be upset if I don't answer right away? Did I say the wrong thing? What if they pull away? What if this moment goes sideways like the last one? And your mind doesn't mean to exhaust you. It's just doing what it was trained to do, protect you. But when you start letting go of what's not yours, emotionally, mentally, energetically, you begin to notice something different. Your thoughts slow down. Not because you're less intelligent, but because your mind isn't spending all its energy rehearsing imaginary battles. You stop preparing for the next emotional emergency, and you start becoming present in your actual life. You don't need to mentally rehearse your worth anymore. You don't need to replay old conversations to decode what someone really meant. You don't need to make every quiet moment mean you failed. That mental clutter, it clears, not overnight, but gradually. And in its place, something softer arrives. You get curious instead of anxious. You feel space in your head again. You start noticing the moment instead of managing it. Even the way you make decisions changes. You're no longer making choices based on guilt or fear or people-pleasing. You're not saying yes because you're scared of what no might cost you. You say yes when it's honest, and no when it's kind to yourself. And with every small shift, your mind starts to trust you again. Trust that you'll rest before you collapse. That you'll say what needs to be said without wrapping it in apology. That you'll choose clarity over overexertion. That you won't sacrifice yourself again just to avoid disappointing someone else. It's like your internal world stops shouting and finally begins to listen. And in that listening, you discover something powerful. Not everything you carry is yours to process. Not every emotion in the room belongs to you. Not every relationship requires you to shrink just to keep it intact. And once you see that clearly, once you feel the freedom of letting that go, you don't rush back into old habits. You begin building something quieter, more sacred, less dramatic, but far more alive. Not just a life that works, but a life that feels good to live in. Sometimes the hardest part isn't carrying the weight. It's letting yourself believe you're allowed to set it down. Because somewhere along the way, you started to believe that if you weren't doing the most, you weren't doing enough. That if you weren't overextending, anticipating, or managing everyone's experience, you were failing. Not as a person, but as a friend, a partner, a sibling, a son, a daughter, a leader, a human. You told yourself, this is just who I am. But what if it's not? What if being the strong one wasn't your nature, but your adaptation? What if always being the one who shows up, even when you're running on empty, was never about strength, but about fear? Fear of not being needed, fear of being seen as selfish, fear of letting someone down and watching them walk away. So you carry what's not yours. You carry what no one else is even aware you're holding. And when it gets heavy, you don't ask for help. You ask yourself to do better. You believe it's your job to make things easier for everyone else, even if it means life stays hard for you. And slowly, you shape your entire identity around the weight. You forget who you are without it. You start to wonder, if I stop carrying this, who will I be? That's why it's hard to let go. Because when the weight has become part of your story, putting it down can feel like erasing yourself, like losing the one thing you've always been relied on for. But here's what they don't tell you. You're allowed to evolve past who you were when you first picked that weight up. You're allowed to rewrite your role. You're allowed to say, I don't want to be the one who holds everything together anymore. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you awake, because the strongest people aren't the ones who hold the most. They're the ones who know what's theirs and what isn't. They're the ones who finally realize that peace isn't found in being everything for everyone. Peace is found in being fully yourself, even when that means disappointing the version of you that only existed to make others comfortable. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not becoming a better version of the over-functioning self, but becoming the version of you who never had to hold it all in the first place. You were never meant to carry it all. If this spoke to you, drop a comment. I'm putting the weight down. And if you need more reminders like this, subscribe. No pressure, just space to breathe.